EA's Dead Space Remake finds itself launching at an interesting time, not just within the context of EA itself or the consoles it's launching on, but within the gauntlet of survival horror. Dead Space helps mark a return to full-price single-player experiences from the controversial publishing juggernaut, along with titles like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and its upcoming sequel, Jedi Survivor. Dead Space also finds itself as one of the first truly next-gen exclusive console platform launches on PS5 and Series X, with no accompanying PS4 or Xbox One port. Nearly 15 years after its original launch on 7th generation consoles, the Dead Space remake trounces out of development as not only a much-needed showstopper for next-gen consoles, or a strong argument for reviving Dead Space, but also as one piece in a survival horror remake jigsaw puzzle. Flanked by fan-favorite remakes of Resident Evil titles such as 2 and 4, as well as a long-awaited Silent Hill 2 remake, Dead Space 2023 has some big shoes to fill. Developer EA Motive fills the shoes of its original 2008 release with one of PS5 and Series X's best-looking and sounding games, but the design of the original title leaves a little to be desired when compared to its survival horror contemporaries. Not a lot, but just a little. Dead Space occurs in the year 2508, when a repair crew is sent to investigate a problem with the USG Ishimura, a planet-cracking ship of great significance to our repair crew's employers. To say as little as possible, the repair mission does not go very smoothly, and we soon find ourselves fighting our way through the Ishimura with no clear way off. We play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer hoping to find his romantic partner Nicole on board the Ishimura. We're told it's been 6 months since they've seen each other and have only communicated over video. The plot follows the same structure as the original title, with a few minor alterations such as optional side missions and a fully voiced, as opposed to silent, Isaac Clarke. The voice acting and script is solid. Characters sound like a team of strained professionals trying to work together to solve problems while realizing any moment could be their last. This is a good thing, because the player is very frequently stopped for unskippable dialogue, explaining why Isaac has to go do the next thing he has to go do. This brings us to the overall story structure, which is not quite as endearing as the moment-to-moment writing. Right from the very beginning, Isaac is tasked with fixing some specific MacGuffin on the Ishimura, with the explanation that it'll help the remaining crew get off of the ship. From this point on, the next 8 or so hours of the story is Isaac being told that what he just did either didn't help or actually made things worse. It's a video game from 2009, so the plot is mainly just an excuse to get from points A to B, killing zombies and upgrading weapons. But that doesn't mean the constant futility of Isaac's work is any less comical or potentially grating. Dead Space has a sort of B-plot that creeps up into the A-plot eventually, but how invested you are in it will largely depend on how much time you spend exploring the ship, going through text logs, and actually paying attention to characters when they're talking. Dead Space's initial premise and concluding strokes are much more satisfying and interesting than the grocery list that dominates the middle of the game. I also wound up feeling a bit more connected to the supporting cast than the protagonist himself, and the game's tone feels a bit more self-serious than most of its Japanese survival horror contemporaries. These complaints aside, Dead Space 2023's story is occasionally interesting, and does a serviceable job moving the player along to see the real star of the show, the visuals and audio. This is the section of the review where Dead Space, in all of its blood-soaked metallic darkness, shines the brightest. After receiving a patch for the PS5 version, which addressed a bizarre issue where variable rate shading led to a decidedly fuzzier image on Sony's console, the remake lands as one of the sharpest, most dazzling 60 FPS experiences I've had on a home console. While the facial animations aren't quite on par with something like the Callisto Protocol or The Last of Us Part 2, characters look expressive, at least when they have their masks off or are in front of you. The guns look and feel incredible, with the game's reworked gore system chipping away flesh from the limbs of the necromorphs, functioning as a brilliantly bloody real-time HP bar. Isaac receives similar treatment, with a light blue gauge on the back of his suit representing his health supply. The minimal heads-up display allows the game to look even cleaner, and lets your eye focus on its superb visual presentation instead of some kind of map or status bar. That is all to have said nothing of the audio, which would be a crime. Years after Sony unveiled its dedicated 3D audio inside of PlayStation 5, gamers can finally experience something that truly feels like some sort of next-gen audio experience. The dynamics, textures, and directionality are all of the highest quality I've heard in a game, making me incredibly excited for the future of 9th-gen console audio. The lighting and audio are the main components of the remake that ratchet up the fear factor well beyond what was possible in 2008. Even if by the end of the game you're blasting through necromorphs like they're Black Ops Nazi zombies, the first few hours of Dead Space are actually pretty scary, thanks largely to the extremely dark environments, many of which see the player almost completely dependent on audio to get the drop on incoming necromorphs. Dead Space 2023 looks and sounds like the best and biggest budget survival horror has seen in a while, but how does the gameplay hold up? To answer that question, we have to first acknowledge that this will likely be the most subjective aspect of playing Dead Space, but is also the most important, as playing this game is what you'll be doing for 99.9% of the time that isn't the intro cutscene. It's worth mentioning that I have not played the original Dead Space in its entirety, and am subsequently lacking in any rose-tinted nostalgia to generously color some of Dead Space 2023's more questionable game design. On the whole, this game plays like a compromise between Resident Evil and BioShock. I say compromise because while Dead Space's design isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, there was more than once during my playthrough where I wished I was running through the halls of the Raccoon City Police Department or sunken Art Deco sky bridges of Rapture instead. Dead Space feels like a third-person shooter that went a little survival horror, or a survival horror game that went a little Gears of War. It never hits the addictingly precise Metroidvania style of titles like RE2 or 7, feeling a bit stronger on the shooter side than the survival horror side. One of the primary factors that makes Dead Space feel a touch insecure in its survival horror identity is its somewhat misshapen weapon and inventory management systems. The game has way more guns than you'll ever need, with only a few of them being optimal for certain enemy types. The game decides to give you ammo randomly for whatever is in your inventory, meaning that you'll frequently be completely out of ammo on a gun you'll like and stuck with a poor tool for the job, unless you leave some guns in your storage, forcing the game's hand and only receiving the ammo you want. Keep all your guns in your inventory and you can only equip 4 at once, meaning you'll have to constantly cycle back and forth between your guns that have ammo and your guns that just ran out. Combine this with the somewhat inconsistent checkpoints and healing item dispersal, and the design flamboyantly jumps out as very of its time, in a way the superb visuals can't quite mask. The game also features some truly ridiculous puzzle sections involving an oxygen timer, zero-gravity movement, and an array of turrets, circuit boards, batteries, and environmental hazards that can range from vaguely irritating to comically antiquated, even if they have been improved from the original title. The couple of boss fights, like the puzzles, feature simplistic rinse-and-repeat design choices, such as awkwardly dodging attacks and then shooting explosive weak points on a large space kraken. I truly did not enjoy these sections, which once again do not complement Isaac's expansive arsenal, and like Arkham Knight's Batmobile, place a little more confidence in the zero-G gameplay mechanic than players may appreciate by the time the credits roll. While my criticisms of the gameplay are a bit stronger than I've seen in other reviews, I do also think shooting necromorphs with my favorite weapons like the plasma cutter or the saw blades is truly a great time. Dead Space has outstanding game feel, and if you can get into a flow state with a decent amount of health and ammo for a gun you like, then shooting, crushing, and looting your way through the Ishimura is truly solid horror fun. In fact, I actually enjoyed Dead Space much more on repeat playthroughs. The game includes a robust New Game Plus mode, complete with an upgrade tree carryover and new collectibles. It was easy to see how reviewers who already played the game in 2009 enjoyed their first playthrough of the remake much more than I did, as some of the more convoluted or gimmicky elements of the gameplay had already become second nature to them. I would venture to guess that existing Dead Space fans are probably much more likely to enjoy this remake, although there's certainly potential for new fans who are willing to slog through some questionable boss fights and puzzles to become new diehard fans of the series. For all the completionists out there, myself included, Dead Space 2023 features a pretty robust trophy and achievement list, including the requirement to beat the game on its impossible mode, a difficulty setting where you only get one life. Whether Dead Space is worth the $70 price of admission is up to you, and how much you see yourself getting out of the remake, but I can safely say there's definitely more than just one playthrough worth here. Overall, EA's 2023 Dead Space Remake knocks it out of the dimly lit park on its presentation, offering an exciting glimmer of hope to Dead Space fans, survival horror fans, and PS5 and Series X owners hoping for some true next-gen software. The game is mostly fun to play through, with some antiquated and imprecise design choices taking away from the tightness of the experience. The story is worth experiencing, mainly for its bookends and interesting lore, and not as much for Isaac's tour to fixing every possible component of the Ishimura midsection of the game. The title improves on subsequent playthroughs, but never finds itself running as well oiled as something like RE2. If you're an existing fan of the series or down for a little 2009 puzzle section in your otherwise beautiful serial, then the Dead Space remake is a safe buy for you.